8 minutes after the hour, 3 o'clock. Welcome in. It's a Tuesday, March 21st, 1989. Where do I begin? Where do I begin with you people? Yesterday, and, it's something that crops up from time to time. There was, one of these marvelous people called up and said, "Oh, you never tell monologues, you never tell stories anymore. You're not like you used to be. Oh, I don't know what's going on with you. It's just not like it used to be." Tried to explain to the dear, sweet young thing that what used to be was a year and a half ago. On another station, a different time period, and all that kind of good stuff. But nonetheless, it makes me very, very, very sensitive and touchy because, you see, I would really like every day of the week to do something very serious, something worthwhile to discuss. And the fact of the matter is I also like to eat, and I like to drive large cars and sit on leather furniture. And unless I want to sit on soapboxes and share apples and cheap cheese with my wife, I have to kind of do what works. But you want to hear a story, sweetheart? You want to hear a monologue? Well, you gather yourself real close to the radio. Come on now. You sit yourself right down there. Take the phone off the hook. Make sure that nobody's going to disturb you, because this is a story. It'll take about an hour to tell. You want to hear one? I'll tell you one. It's a story about a man named Henry, a woman named Elizabeth, and a kid named Robert. They're very real people. They lived about 1,300 miles from here. Henry was a first-generation American. He was born and raised in a ghetto, literally a ghetto, an Eastern European ghetto in the city of Philadelphia. He did not speak English until he was 10 years old. His dog didn't even speak English. His mother ran a candy store. His father was a paper hanger until the Depression. They lost the candy store during the Depression, and his mother went to work in a cigar factory. She became a damn good cigar factory worker. Henry grew up to be a relatively handsome young man. He played the accordion. That's kind of a thigh slapper now, but back then, believe it or not, it made him a somewhat popular guy. Henry went to a high school, Camden Catholic High School, where he met Elizabeth. Everybody called her Betty. She was a very, very beautiful young woman, genuinely a beautiful young woman. She was the second child in a family of 4, one of those good old-fashioned Irish Catholic families. Her father's name was Mike. There would have been more of them, but their mother died when the 4th child was born, 4 years into the marriage. Betty and Henry were sweethearts. They went all through high school together. They graduated in 1940. Betty went to work for the telephone company. Henry tried to join the Air Force, but they wouldn't let him in. They wouldn't let him in because his parents, Chester and Genevieve, the paper hanger and the cigar roller, had never bothered to apply for citizenship because Chester had entered the country illegally. Well, actually, he had entered it legally. He stayed illegally. And so they had never applied for citizenship, and that was found out when Henry tried to join the Air Force. They were devastated. The family was absolutely devastated because they were good people. They paid their bills, they paid their taxes, they lived the way they were supposed to live, except for this minor, itsy-bitsy, teeny-weeny little thing that almost everybody had forgotten about, the fact that they were not U.S. citizens. So they busted their humps and became U.S. citizens so that Henry could join the military. By now, the country was at war. But by now, there were no more openings in the Air Force, so Henry had to settle for the Navy. Shortly after Henry joined the Navy, Henry and Betty decided to marry. It was the thing to do back in the mid-1940s, when boys were going off to fight a war, and girls were left at home to work for the telephone company, or in this particular case, Betty had left the telephone company and gone to work for the New York shipyard. where she was a blueprint folder making $125 a week, an incredible amount of money back then. Incredible amount of money. Well, they got married. Henry was sent off to the Pacific. Where he had a nervous breakdown. He couldn't take it. The great shame of his life left him with a nervous tic that, to the best of my knowledge, he has to this day. And they sent him home. Well, Henry and Betty set up housekeeping, and lo and behold, they had a kid. If the kid was to be a girl, its name would have been Dolores. If it was to be a boy, its name was to be Henry Robert. At the last moment, the name became Robert Henry. Henry didn't like that. Betty didn't much care. She preferred the name Robert. And Henry wasn't there the day that they were filling out the birth certificate. The kid was an only child. The kid was the first grandchild on either side. Obviously, the first nephew. You could say he was probably spoiled rotten, at least in terms of being given things and given a great deal of attention. He was a reasonably normal, healthy kid. Like all kids, he loved his mother very, very much. And he loved his father very, very much. Now, Henry was somewhat of a dullard, if you must know the truth. Henry believed that his job was to get up and go to work 5 days a week, and to come home, and a couple of nights a week go out and work again. Henry was a machinist. I suppose you might call him a tool and die maker. By day. And at night, he played the accordion. Henry had never worked on Sundays because Sundays were for the family. And on Sundays, the family would pile into the car and go for a drive. That's what people did back in the late 1940s and the early 1950s on Sundays. Henry saw to it that his family had the first television set on the block, and it wasn't just a television set, thank you. It was an Admiral three-way console. Cost a fortune. It was only a brick house, a brick row house, but it was the best damn brick row house on that block. The furniture was the best, French provincial. Uncomfortable as all hell, but nonetheless, Henry had been raised to believe that French provincial was the best kind of furniture you could possibly have. And Elizabeth went along. They totally remodeled the house, completely gutted it and started over again. I remember not once eating in the kitchen. The house came with an eating kitchen. They took it out because Henry and Betty believed that you should eat in the dining room, not in the kitchen. And so every meal was eaten in the dining room. They eliminated the kitchen table. It was impossible to eat there. And up at the top of the steps to the right was the second bedroom, the kids' bedroom. It was a fine, fine bedroom. They had selected a wallpaper that had pirates and desert islands and treasure chests and parrots on it. It was a beige background, and all of the characters and things I've just mentioned were on there in bright, vivid colors. It was a kid's room. Nice kid's room filled with toys. The times were strange back then, at least by the standards of the people who lived today and maybe didn't live in the 1940s and the 1950s. Things were a lot different, or at least on the surface they were a lot different. You see, people were probably just the same as they are today. They just pretended not to be. There was something going on in that house that goes on in houses today and went on in houses back then. Not all of them, but some of them. There was something going on. A marriage was falling apart. Like I said, Henry was kind of a dull guy. He didn't go dancing. He wasn't much in for partying. I recall that he had one friend, a man named Joe Vickery, who he was in the Navy with, a guy who he also played drums with. Now, Betty. Betty was a party child. I mean, Betty was beautiful. Betty loved to dance. Betty loved to sing. Betty loved to go out. And it just didn't seem to work out very well for Henry and Betty. They had virtually nothing in common, except that pretentious red brick row house and the little kid that used to play upstairs in the room with the tan wallpaper with the pirates on it. I was a kid, if you haven't figured it out by now. And I have very vivid recollections, particularly on Friday nights, as a small child, when my father would be away playing his accordion, earning extra money. My mother would have a visitor out front of the house. It didn't really mean very much to me, until one god-awful Friday night. The worst night of my life. It would be an absolute lie for me to tell you that I remember a great deal about that Friday, at least up until early Friday evening. I don't. I did not realize when I got up that morning that it was going to be a very special day in my life. I assumed that everything went normally. I assumed that dinner was served when my father came home from work and that he changed and left to go out on his part-time job. And no sooner had he driven away from the house, all hell broke loose. Out of nowhere, cardboard boxes came. Out of nowhere, those boxes were filled. My mother was frantically packing, telling me that we were leaving, telling me that she and I were going off to a new life and that soon I would have a new dad. A much more exciting dad. Not that dull one that I had who didn't know how to play baseball, who never watched football games, who knew nothing of basketball, who only knew of work and rides with the family on Sunday afternoon. There was a knock at the door, and two very strange people I'd never seen before in my life, a man and a woman, were there suddenly helping my mother to carry all of these possessions in paper bags and cardboard boxes out of the house and into their car. I remember sitting there on the blue sofa, the blue mohair sofa, and as clear can be, I can still see it, was the old Electrolux vacuum cleaner, sitting there by the burgundy mohair chair right by the front door, on an angle to the front door. There was some discussion as to whether or not it would be taken or left behind. But I can see it as though it were just this afternoon that I was in that room. It was left behind, by the way. That night I would spend in the cellar of the man and the woman who showed up to help my mother unload the contents of the house. It's not all as bad as it sounds. It's not like it was a dusty coal bin type of a cellar. No, it was somewhat finished. But I would spend that night there, and I would spend the next 3 weeks in that cellar, day and night. I would not go to school. I would not go out to play. But I was kept in the cellar, hidden, until my mother could get some kind of a court order giving her temporary custody of me. That I was being hidden from my father. And I was told that I was being hidden from my father, the man who just a couple of days before was a very nice man. The man who just a couple of days before was my buddy, was my dad. I was now told that he would steal me away if he could find me. He would take me away forever and ever and ever, and I would never see my mother again if I ever came out of that cellar. I remember being in that cellar, in that house, that very strange house in Camden, New Jersey, day and night. In the daytime by myself. Everyone else, all of the adults, worked. I remember hearing the mailman come up on the steps and open up the letter slot and dropping whatever came for that day's mail inside, but not knowing if it was my father breaking down the door trying to steal me. I was 8 years old. Kids think in terms of that when they're 8 years old. That Friday night, the night that I was taken from my house at 128 Maple Avenue, was a very, very eventful night. I would never again go to school or play with the friends that I'd known all of my life. I would never see them again. I would never return to that school. Nor would I ever live in my own house again. It was to be 7 years till I even had my own room again. Why? Because my mother was having an affair with the boss's son. My mother had taken a job when I was 5 or 6 years old as a telephone receptionist for a company not far away from where we lived, an electronics firm that did a lot of very secretive government work. It was owned by an elderly man and his son, who was just about my mother's age. They were in their mid-20s at the time, close to 30. The boss's son had a great big house in a town called Haddonfield, New Jersey, a very, very nice town. He had 4 healthy kids, a beautiful young wife. He even had a summer home on Long Beach Island, New Jersey. I know all of this because my mother would take me along with her to sit hour after hour staring at the house in Haddonfield or staring at the house on Long Beach Island in the summertime. The affair just wasn't working out quite the way it was supposed to be. He kept telling her that it wouldn't be too much longer until he left his family and married her. I wonder what went on inside of her head those many, many, many hours over many years. That affair was to last some 10 years and only ended when his father died. And the boss's son sold the company for $8 million, packed up the 4 kids, the beautiful wife, sold the houses, and moved off to California. But before all of that happened, so many other things happened. There was the divorce. It took almost 2 years for that divorce to become final. Things were a lot different back then. You needed a reason to get a divorce. There was no such thing as irreconcilable differences. There was adultery, 1 or 2 other possible causes. My parents were divorced because of adultery. There was the day that I had to get all dressed up and go down to the great big courthouse in Camden, New Jersey, downtown Camden, New Jersey. The building made out of marble with the marble floors and the marble walls and the marble ceiling. And the great big oak furniture. And go inside of a room that had a fence around it, or at least what looked like a fence. This humongous desk where a man in a black dress was sitting, holding a little wooden hammer. And I had to tell that man who I wanted to live with. My mom, who loved me dearly, or my dad, who was trying to steal me. It's not nice to make a little kid do that. It's not fair. Judge was a good judge. Came out from behind his great big desk, and he literally came over and he sat down next to me. I was sitting inside of a little fenced-in chair. At least that's, again, what it looked like. And I even had to put my hand on a book and swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth. So help me God. And I was prepared to tell the truth. And I had to explain to the judge that I loved my mother very, very much and that I wanted to live with her. And that while I loved my father, I was afraid of him. The judge asked all kinds of questions. And then he sent me from the room. He didn't issue his opinion right away. I'm not sure if it was a matter of days, weeks, or months, but it seemed like an eternity. And I remember one day my mother coming home early from work, and I was still living in the cellar. Only this time I was allowed out of the cellar. I was just sleeping there. And I was sitting in the cellar, watching television, and the door opened up the top of the steps, and it was my mother early from work, and she was screaming and shouting in joy and waving her arms and came running down the steps to tell me that the judge had said it was okay, I could continue to live with her and I wouldn't ever have to live with my father again. She was very pleased. Unfortunately, of course, I would have to see my father once a week, she told me. And once a week, my father would come to pick me up. And for the first several months, every Sunday was a very, very special Sunday. There were trips to the Franklin Institute in Philadelphia and the Philadelphia Museum and parks and sometimes a ride to the seashore. And then the Sunday afternoon trips began to just be going from my house over to his mother's house and back again. During that time, there were intensive battles on the part of the two so-called adults over me and my affections. Each one would pump me for information as to what the other had done the previous week. Well, did so-and-so go out? Who did she go out with? I see. Well, what did your father want to know? Were there any women there? I see. Each side tried to discredit the other through me. After 3 or 4 years of this, it became apparent that I wasn't going to change my mind. I was not going to give up one parent for the other. I was going to keep the situation as it was. And then I remember the rejection on the part of my father and his family when it became clear that my mother had won. As late as my 15th birthday, my grandmother, my father's mother, tried to convince me that someone else was my father. Now, if you had ever seen a picture of the two of us, you would know how ridiculous that was. But that's okay. What difference does it make? I remember the last time she tried. She told me all kinds of horrible stories about my mother and what a loose woman she was and how she was never, my grandmother was never quite sure as to who precisely was my father. The man I knew as my father just sat there as my grandmother went on, with mind-boggling detail of things that happened, obviously, before I was born. 15 years ago. He just sat there. You know, I still love him dearly. But I'll never forgive that son of a bitch for that night. A defenseless kid. Alone. The object of a decade-long game between two so-called adults, sitting there listening to his grandmother, looking over at his father, who sat there staring down at the floor in silence. Do you want to know what that room looked like? I can tell you. There was a gray cut pile carpet on the floor, wall to wall. The walls were a triple tone of blue. I sat in the brown mohair wingback chair. My grandmother sat in what was referred to as my grandfather's chair, a large overstuffed gray chair with an ottoman. There was a two-tier table that separated my chair and my grandmother's chair. On the far side of the room was a wine-red mohair wing-backed couch. My father sat in the lemon-yellow wing-back chair that had the embroidery on the back. Next to his chair was a triple-tiered table. On that table was a lamp. The lamp was made out of a vase of a clown. It was all French provincial, by the way. Would you like to know what time it was? It was approximately 6:40 in the evening of October the 14th, 1960. Would you like to know why I was there? Oh, it's relatively simple. I came home that day and found out that my mother had moved. She had moved out with one of a long succession of boyfriends that she took up with when the rich guy took his family and ran off to California and broke her heart. By the way, the rich guy also fired her before he left. But there was so much more that happened even before that night. There was the town I lived in, a righteous, proper town, thank you. A good Christian town. I often refer to it as a Walt Disney kind of town, and that's exactly what it was. Still may be, as far as I know. No bars, no liquor stores, lots of churches, good, righteous people. People who didn't allow their children to play with the children of divorced women. There was the school that I went to. The school where the nuns weren't too fond of teaching the child of a divorced woman, and occasionally used to beat the kid. There was the Cub Scout troop in that community that would not allow a divorced woman to be a den mother. There was the Boy Scout troop in that community where the Boy Scout leader suggested that perhaps the child of a divorced woman did not belong in the Boy Scout troop, at least not in the one in the Catholic school, that perhaps one of the Boy Scout troops sponsored by a Protestant church might allow such a child. There was the rest of the family, the aunts and the uncles who did everything in their power to ostracize the child of the divorced woman for fear that he might somehow contaminate their beloved children. There were some of the town folks who used to call from their windows or their doors or their front porches to their children to come away, not to talk to the child of the divorced woman, who did not give a damn what the child of the divorced woman felt like. There were different times. Sometimes it's hard to think that the world was like that just a relative handful of years ago. I'm not sure if it's for the better that it isn't or if it's for the worse that it isn't still the same way. Where people call their kids in from playing with a divorced lady's kid. Where people are tossed out of the Cub Scouts or the Boy Scouts because they're the child of a divorced woman. I'm not sure if it's a better world or a worse world. And it isn't quite like that anymore, that's for sure. But there are an awful lot of things that haven't changed at all. There's no doubt in my mind that somewhere right in this community tonight, this very night, some mother or some father will come home from work, and when the other spouse leaves, will pack it all up, grab a kid, and run like hell. There's no doubt in my mind that somewhere in this very community tonight, a kid will be yanked out of his school, yanked out of his neighborhood, yanked out of his family, yanked out of his home, taken off somewhere else, his life irrevocably changed, without his having so much as one word of input. You see, in the case of my mother and father, we're not talking about a man who beat his wife or an alcoholic or somebody who was irresponsible and somebody that didn't pay the bills. We're just talking about a couple of people who, after a relative handful of years together, drifted apart. The passion had kind of cooled off. And there's not a doubt in my mind that somewhere in this community tonight, at least one more marriage, one more family will disintegrate for the exact same reason. Just because two adults, just because two so-called adults got a little tired of each other, just because two so-called adults didn't feel like playing house anymore, just because the naughty parts on one of those two so-called adults were tingling a little bit too much, or just because one of those so-called two adults was trying to get even with the other one, and decided to play games with the only thing that they really had in common between them, some kid. Some innocent, helpless kid. There's not a doubt in my mind that somewhere today in this community, some kid sat in a chair inside the fence next to the great big desk and talked to the man in the black dress and had to tell him which one of the parents he or she wanted to live with. Not a doubt in my mind about that. There isn't a doubt in my mind that somewhere in this community today, a young child is being hid. Maybe not in a cellar this time, but someplace else. Someplace strange, someplace foreign. Someplace that isn't his room, that isn't her room, that isn't his house, that isn't her house. Trembling in fear because mommy or daddy is going to come and try to steal them away. That hasn't changed at all. None of that has changed an iota. None of it is likely to change. Ever. Because little boys and little girls, big little boys and big little girls, continue to have kids when they're just kids themselves. Thinking that somehow, convincing themselves that somehow they have a right to bring other human beings into this world, little human beings, and then jerk them around. Convincing themselves that they love children when they don't love children. It somehow makes them feel masculine. It somehow makes them feel feminine to have children. And then not give a damn about those kids. You see them every single day. All you have to do is step outside your door. I sometimes wonder how many people who genuinely do have children really like them. My more cynical moments, I would suggest it's perhaps 10%. And that the other 90 find them to be, for the most part, a tremendous inconvenience. So what effect has all of this had on me? I don't know. I have no idea at all. It was only in latter years that I began to realize precisely what had happened, exactly what was asked of me. As it was going on, frankly, it was quite normal. What the hell did I know? I thought every little boy had to go to court and tell the man in the black dress who the hell he wanted to live with. I thought everybody's father tried to steal them. I thought everybody's mother used to take them to sit there and watch somebody else's house that they had a crush on, hoping against hope that somebody would walk past a window or step outside to take the trash out. And you could get a glimpse of them. I thought that's the way life was. I didn't realize that was unusual until I was older. Much older. So I don't know what effect it had on me. But I do know that I have a remarkable ability to remember these things, to remember them in considerable detail. And I do know that I have an ability to tell you about them. A lot of people can't let things like this, like that, can't let it come out, can't express it, can't put it into words. So why do I tell it? Why do I tell this story? Simple. If you haven't figured it out by now. I suppose there are some cynics out there that would say, oh, well, Lassiter's just trying to make people feel sorry for him. Just tell a tear-jerking story. No, I don't need you to feel sorry for me, thank you. I tell the story so that I can come down as hard as I possibly can on those of you who are playing games with your kids. On the modern-day Betty and Henrys. Those of you who are letting your naughty parts rule your lives, then your children. Those of you who have brought human beings into this world, but don't really seem to give a damn about them. I do it to come down as hard on you as I know how to do. It's too bad that neither my father nor my mother are around to listen to this story. Yeah, to listen to it in public on the radio. You probably think that's a very cruel thing to say. That's the kind of thing that an adult would think. Oh, how cruel to humiliate and shame an adult on the radio. To tell these terrible, terrible, deep, personal, awful personal stories on the radio. What kind of a cruel man would do that to his parents? It's the kind of thing an adult would say. I don't think it's the kind of thing a kid would say. A kid who was trying to explain to the adults what kind of damage they can do. Lassiter's stories, nobody else can touch him. Classic Lassiter story. By the way, while the classic Lassiter story was being told, the usual amount of hate calls came into the station. Basically, people shouting obscenities, grunting, that type of thing. But there it is, the classic Lassiter story. You know, the one that you keep on calling me up and saying, geez, Lassiter, you don't do that kind of stuff anymore. So now what are you going to do? What are you going to do about it, huh? You going to call me up and fart? Or maybe you will tear yourself away from your lover and roll out of bed and call the station to tell me how moved you were by the story. Tell me how much you love children and how sorry you feel for that poor little boy. Well, in all sincerity, it is my hope, my deepest, my fondest hope, that story just rips your heart out of your chest. If you have a kid, and don't take his or her feelings into account as you're putting your life together, I hope that story rips your heart right out of your chest. I hope it ruins your supper. Hell, I hope it ruins your week, your life. If that's how you treat your kids. If that's how much concern you give to the family that you have put together. If you're one of those people who's now trying to take it apart. I hope it ruins your damned life. I hope it gives you nightmares. I hope you can never get it out of your head. It's not an easy story to tell, you know. It's a hell of a story. It's a miserable story. It's a sad story. It's a painful story. And if you're the kind of individual that sits there while his or her mother tries to destroy one of your children with a story, and you sit there and keep your mouth shut like my father did, I hope your life is ruined too. Or if you're the type of woman like my mother was that tried to destroy the image of a kid's father, I hope your life is ruined, too. If any of this story applies to you, I hope you have learned something this afternoon. I hope you have learned how you might begin to view the world through the eyes of a kid, through the eyes of a child, an innocent kid, who had nothing whatsoever to do with you messing up your life, who had nothing whatsoever to do with decisions that you made that you suddenly don't feel very comfortable with. Too bad. I have utterly no time whatsoever for people who play with the emotions of a child for their own selfish needs. I know there are many, many instances where a family must be broken up because of abuse or some other irrational behavior. But the sad fact of the matter is, most of the time, families are broken up for very, very flimsy, frivolous reasons. And when there are children involved, more often than not, those children become the object of a game between a man and a woman to hurt each other, without worrying at all about that kid. Well, I have no idea where my dad is, and my mother is long dead. So they didn't hear this story this afternoon. They did not have to sit there and squirm through it. Well, I'll tell you one thing. If you're anything like Henry and Betty, and if you're jerking your kid around anyway like they did with Bobby, there are two things I pray for. One, that your kid becomes a talk show host. The second is that he tells a story when you have to sit there and listen to it. 12 minutes after the hour, 4 o'clock. Hey, welcome back. It is hour number 2 on this Tuesday, March the 21st, 1989. Boy, didn't you enjoy that story in the last hour? Holy cow. How about the part where the kid was sitting there with his grandmother trying to tell him that his dad wasn't really his dad, and the dad was looking down at the floor, and the guy says, "I love the man with all of my heart and soul, but I'll never forgive the son of a bitch." Wasn't that really emotional? Wasn't that really dramatic in that story? I'm looking at my board. I have 4 callers on my board. At least 3 of them really nice people whom I genuinely enjoyed talking with, but at least 3 of them are what you would refer to as very serious regular callers. Gino from West Shore, TJ in Clearwater, Eric in Pinellas Park. Guys, I really appreciate the calls, but under these circumstances, no. Thank you very much, but no. I appreciate the calls, but you see, yesterday I got a call from a young woman who said, "Oh, you never tell the stories. You don't do the monologues anymore. You're not like you used to be." Well, the fact of the matter is, you see, it's not me, it's you guys. You aren't like you used to be. I told that story probably about 3 years ago when I first came to this market. Took just about as much time to tell it, just about an hour. You see, I used to look at this business a lot differently. I get paid a hell of a lot of money to do this. I enjoy this job with all of my heart and all of my soul. But I just don't see any reason any longer to either, A, do your thinking for you in the way of those nice, logical, progressive monologues so that you know how to think about an issue. I don't see any reason to do that. It's a hell of a lot of trouble, to tell you the truth. Nor do I see any reason to entertain you with the tragedies of my life so that you can sit there in your voyeuristic way and say, "Wow, that was really a neat story, and I really like the part about." I don't see any reason to do that anymore because it doesn't stimulate any conversation with you guys. Nor does it change anything. Doesn't change a damn thing. And to tell you the truth, it kind of rips me apart to sit there and think back on those days and those incidents and those stories. So don't tell me I've changed. Don't tell me it's not like it used to be. It's a different time, different place. And yes, dear sweet young woman, I've still noticed that I've yet to hear your voice. Whenever we're talking about something that was serious. Have I? So we'll just turn it into a nice open show. Okay? I mean, you got your hour's worth of tears, didn't you? You got your hour's worth of somebody else's tragedy, didn't you? And, of course, there was even a message in it. 4619. Holiday, hi, you're on the air at News Radio 970 WFLA.
Bob?
Yeah.
Hats off to you for,
No hats off to me. I don't need that kind of... I'm, you know, don't call me up and patronize me, man.
Okay, I'm not trying to patronize. I'm
Great, then don't start the conversation with hats off to you.
Okay. Then I'll go... Oh, I'm sorry. I'll go straight to the point. The point is, number one, I felt that I felt that the despair in your voice was not so much the memory sense recall on your half, but the fact that the care that you feel for the kids that are going to go through it. And I think that more people should try to help the kids that have to go through this. I went through a similar situation, but that's not the point. But besides the fact of the parents being... the parents that do these things, they put their kids through a lot. But that Disneyland town, these so-called fundamental Christians...
They weren't fundamental Christians. They were mainstream Christians.
Mainstream.
Yep. They were Methodists and Presbyterians and Episcopalians.
Just to see the pain that they had to cause. You know, if that's what a Christian is, then I don't want to claim to be a Christian.
Oh, I'm not so sure. You know, in retrospect, to tell you the truth, I'm not so sure that what they were doing isn't what I wish was still being done today. You see, it's much too easy now to just walk out on your commitments. It's much too easy to walk out on your family. Back then, it was a real disgrace, and you had to pay for it. I mean, if you thought I went through a lot of crap in that period in that town, imagine what kind of crap my mother went through.
But did the kids have to pay for it? Innocent.
Well, there weren't as many kids, I guess, going through divorces back then either.
That's
like
true.
I said, in retrospect, I'm not sure that it was the worst possible scenario. It might be worse today. It might be worse today because it is no longer a disgrace to just, hey, I don't feel like doing this anymore. I don't feel like being married anymore. I don't feel like being a daddy anymore. I don't feel like being a mommy anymore. I don't feel like doing any of this anymore.
We see it all too often, but at the same time, Christian or not, people have got to learn that when somebody is a victim, which is no less than what those children are that go through these things, because people just decide, she's just not good enough for me anymore. I can do better. I'm out of here. But those children are still victims, and maybe the women and the men that go through this on their own fruition, by all means, maybe they should still be shunned and still be treated where they would think twice about it. But on the same respect, the children are just innocently being victimized because of it, and I think that this world needs more compassion for these children. A lot of these children are the ones that are out on the streets. I mean,
Well, let me put you down in the column where the world should be more compassionate toward its children.
If you could fill that column up, maybe it happened. But that's the perfect world we don't live in.
Thank you very much.
Have a good day, Bob.
No, certainly wouldn't want to trouble you with, sticking to the topic. Let's see, Bel Air, you're on the air at 970 WFLA.
Hey, Bob.
Yeah.
My name's Eric. My parents are divorced, and it's been about 5 years. They never pushed me around and stuff, and I'm pretty lucky. I get to see my father, and I feel sorry for some of these kids who don't get to see their father, and they don't get to see their mother who run away. And you are right that they can't stop for the people getting divorced, and they can't stop people getting beat up, getting their kids beat up and stuff. So.
Thank you very much, Eric.
Okay, see you later. Bye-bye.
Take care. Whoa, sounds to me like the Gary McHenry song. In all probability, Gary McHenry, the world's most dangerous traffic reporter, standing by with a very dangerous traffic report. Now, hi, Gary.
Right out here over the bay without a chute, without any floats, just to bring you traffic, buddy.
That's wow, Gary, that's...
That's impressive. Is that the word you were searching for, Bob? Impressive? Howard Frank.
Welcome back. 24 minutes after the hour, 4 o'clock. 9. We're talking about inflation this afternoon. I've noticed, you probably have too, reading in the newspaper where the government says inflation is going up, and we're asking people to call in and say whether or not they can tell whether or not prices are going up. What are you looking at that way for, Michael? Lutz, you're on the air at 9:70. You think I'm going to play games with this board? Lutz, you're on the air at 970 WFLA.
Hey, Bob.
Yeah.
I'd like to make a comment that, I guess, preface it. I was the greatest father in the world before I became a father. And, we do a lot of things as parents that are wrong, and I wish I could, change some of the things that I've done. I've been married for 20 years and have 2 children, and I hope I don't get a divorce. But I'd like to look at something from your grandmother's point of view.
Mm-hmm.
What she did was terrible. But
sure as hell was, although not quite as bad as what my father did. You see, I understand my grandmother. My grandmother was trying to somehow defend her son, even though he didn't need any defending.
Yeah,
it's not so much my grandmother that I think was... as a matter of fact, if you'll recall, I said nothing disparagingly about her. I love the woman dearly. It was my father who was the son of a bitch in this case.
But I think with time together here...
Gutless son of a bitch.
As a father, the greatest pain I think I've had with my children was when maybe my son would come home or my daughter would come home and say, someone is picking on him, the pain that they felt because they didn't fit in. Or when my daughter was 16 and she broke up with her boyfriend and how much pain she was feeling and whatever pain she was feeling, I felt, and I think any parent goes through that. And I'm sure that your grandmother was feeling a tremendous amount of pain that your father was probably feeling.
I couldn't care less. They were adults.
Well,
they made their own bed.
Oh.
My grandmother hated my mother from day one. She despised my mother because my grandmother was obsessed with my father. And from day one that my mother came into that house, she was despised.
Well, I'd just say that in many cases, as a parent, sometimes we make irrational statements. Maybe, let's say that a child would come home from kindergarten and all the kids would be picking on him for some reason. And you'd want to go grab the other children and say, stop this, you can't pick on my child. And it's not rational. It's not rational behavior, yet it is something that you feel. And that's all I'm saying there.
I don't know what in the hell that has to do with picking up in the middle of the night and moving a kid out of his house because you are infatuated with the boss's son.
Well, that's
and your husband happens to be a little bit dull. I don't see what that has to do with anything that you've said so far.
Well, what you were talking about with the way adults treat children.
Yep.
And you made that as part of your topic was this one. I saw that the peak of your monologue was at that moment when your grandmother was telling you these stories and your father just sat there.
That's right.
And I would also like to maybe, if I can, kind of give...
How you could possibly defend that is beyond me. I mean, when a man sits there who looks like the twin brother of the son, who sits there and listens to his mother make crap up, and then literally say, this man is not your father. And the man just sat there and looked down at the rug. How you could possibly defend that is beyond me, sir. I'm astonished. Aside from the fact that it's my life, my father, and my grandmother, and me that were involved in this story, aside from that, I'm astonished. What kind of a man would do that, sir?
Well, I would say a man that was probably in a great deal of pain, a man who lost his wife because maybe questioned his manhood because he lost his wife to another man.
Sir, by that time, he had a new wife who was only 7 years older than me.
And I would also say a man who lost his only child. A man
No, sir, a man who walked away from his only child. A man who, after it became abundantly clear, was not going to steal the only child away from the wife, the first wife, just walked away from him and just never bothered to call again.
Well, Bob, I'm not really trying to defend anyone in your family. All I'm really trying to say is that I think that before someone becomes a parent,
that there should be some kind of a parenting class that you would have to take. I feel that it's a lifelong commitment that you make to your children, but I also feel that when people are hurt, and from everything that I know about, in fact, I read an article one time that the most pain a person can go through, if they have to list from 1 to 10, the most painful things in their life, number 1 is the loss of a child. Number 2 is a divorce. Loss of a spouse is like 6th or 7th. And what I'm saying is a divorce is a very traumatic experience. And
I know. I'll tell you my divorce story someday, too. You know, if I ever feel like, entertaining the audience again with the tragedies of my life, I'm very well aware of divorce.
Well, I just thought I would add my comments to it. And I think that speaking from a child's perspective, it was something that needed to be said. And, I appreciate you saying it. But I felt some degree of compassion also for your grandmother. I also felt a degree of compassion for your mother and father, because no one wins in a divorce, and unfortunately, it seems as if the kids are the ones who have to pay the biggest penalty. But I still feel compassion.
Well, like I said, sir, during the course of the monologue right there at the end of it, I certainly do hope anybody that's getting ready to do to their kids what my parents did to me, I certainly hope their kids grow up to be talk show hosts.
I agree.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
And car wash. Back to the phones we go. St. Petersburg. Hi there, St. You're on the air at 970 WFLA.
Hi.
Hi.
We had a situation in our family where my sister's husband decided he wanted out of the marriage, and I don't want to get into a long dissertation on what happened, but with the child, what happened was several incidents. One, I remember she came home with a toy that he had bought for her when they were out. And my sister just knocked it out of her hand. It went across the room. I mean, things that I sat there and witnessed, and it just broke my heart, even now, this is years later, and I'm upset when I think back on what was done to this little girl. She came down here to visit me one summer and wanted to send her father a postcard, and my sister wouldn't let me have his address. We could even send the man a postcard. I mean, it was just, to this day, the child suffers from a lot of health problems, and
yeah, a kid probably does. I don't know for a fact whether or not it's, that type of an upbringing that caused the health problems. But you know what's amazing? When you do a show like this, you get all kinds of people that call up and tell all kinds of stories about how other people treat their kids.
Oh, well, nobody's going to admit in the air that they do.
Yeah, roughly half the audience has been divorced. Of those, most of them have kids. But no, they didn't do anything like that.
Well,
somebody else does it.
I saw from them, and I hope that I've learned a lesson. I don't know how I'm going to handle things emotionally if I've ever put in that situation. I know that when people have affairs and the other person that is on the so-called losing side, I know they feel like their guts are getting ripped out. I mean, it's a difficult thing. And I think you kind of go through a mental illness, It's a really hard thing. And I guess, who do you take it out on? But the one that is a living example of, a reminder of where all these emotions are coming from. I don't know. All I know is that people that don't think that it affects the kids better open their eyes and start paying a little more attention.
Well, all I know is that most people that have children don't like children. Just makes them feel more macho or more feminine.
Well, I don't know about that. I know that nobody realizes how difficult parenting is until they have them. I had no idea. It was nice, bring the baby home, feed it. I didn't realize they cried and, did all these things, and you couldn't leave the house without a bag, But, I mean, you deal with it, and you try to do the best you can, and hopefully, you don't deliberately do things that cause the kids pain, the tender. But, well, anyway, I just, it's a real tragedy.
Thank you very much. Be good.
Bye.
Now let's... Well. If it isn't the heartthrob of the Tampa Bay area, Garrow McHenry, the world's most dangerous traffic reporter.
And lover extraordinaire.
With a WFLA airborne traffic report.
Romeo of the sky.
Romeo, where are the foxes tonight, Garrow?
Normally I take Tuesdays off. So the foxes get their laundry done. And
foxes get the laundry
done. Yeah, just kind of clean up around the house and get ready for the rest of the downhill to the weekend week.
Okay.
Hey, traffic.
Well, you might want to get your tape recorder ready because tomorrow morning another Gardner and Company, especially if you're a member of the National Association for Decency or something like that, another one of those filthy sex shows on Gardner and Company tomorrow morning, starting out with John Gardner and Company. Oh, no, that's Join Gardner and Company. I'm sorry. To talk about the demented Dr. Burke. Dr. Burke, of course, is the love surgeon. You'll be talking with one of the women whose life was ruined by the love surgeon. Also, another tell-all with Roxanne Pulitzer tomorrow on the Filthy Sex Alan Gardner and Company show. Unbelievable what they do between the hours of 5 and 9 on this radio station. You just would not believe it. 990, this should be an interesting call. Clearwater, you're on the air at 970 WFLA.
Yeah, I guess I'd like to thank you.
You'd like to thank me?
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Why would you like to thank me?
You did a monologue. You did a personal story, which is even better.
Isn't that great? You got a chance to sit there and actually share some of my tragedies. Do you know I don't have another call on the board but you?
Okay.
Do you know why?
Why?
Because there's not a damn thing that can be done about any of these things. You want to sit here and harp and harp and harp and harp on all of these great social issues that nothing can be done about.
I do realize that.
Yeah. So you've just totally destroyed my show today, but that's okay. I went home last night. I mean, you made me feel so damn bad. I went home last night and talked to my wife about it. I said, God, I'd love to go in there and every day do something serious.
Yeah.
God, I'd love to go in there and have some kind of a meaningful conversation every day.
People won't pick up on it. They don't care.
What do you mean they don't care? What can be done? What can be done?
I don't know. I can't sympathize with your particular problem because my parents are like sweethearts. So.
Yeah, and you can't sympathize with a problem, yeah.
Well, I can. I can sympathize with pain. I can sympathize with that well.
Well, I'm sorry, you live in a fantasy world. You want to talk about all these things that nothing can be done about, all these problems that have no solutions.
It's funny you said that because when I was a child, I was in a fantasy world. I decided the world was a little too cold or too something, and I slipped away for a long time.
You know, world peace, brotherhood, solving the hunger. Because there are no solutions.
I wish they had a class. I wish they taught in school something that made you step into the other person's shoes. I wish they had a class that made you starve for 5 days, put you in prison for a while.
Wouldn't do any good.
Yeah, maybe
wouldn't do a damn good because the sixth day people would forget.
They'd forget, but it went there to begin with. They had it. I mean, it'd be in their subconscious. It would affect them. It would. If it was done real enough, you know.
My dear young woman, may I ask how old you are?
19.
19. Please allow me to pull rank on you. Allow me to do something. I'm literally old enough to be your father.
Okay.
And I've been around the block once or twice, and I've even been to the county fair, believe it or not. Although I snuck in. You say that these things would have an effect on people. Well, there's one thing that you haven't been around long enough to realize, and that is that there is an organ in your body called the brain that is one of the most miraculous devices ever conceived. And one of the things that it does is it forgets pain. It literally forgets pain. It remembers that something was painful, but it cannot remember truly what it felt like. Emotional pain as well as physical pain. So that class that you spoke of 5 days of starvation would be forgotten the following week as soon as your belly was full again. It's just the way we are.
We ought to try it, though. Wouldn't even trying it mean something, though? There's an actual class like that. I mean, people would laugh, but they might think about the class. They might say, oh, my God, there is a course that teaches this.
Unfortunately, human beings do not care about other human beings that they can't see. Human beings that aren't in their own family, their own community. They don't care.
They don't realize that those starving people, there's some of them that have IQs, 140, 150, probably sitting there going crazy.
Why?
It's the same.
Why do you think they're going crazy?
It's just the effect that imprisonment has if you're intelligent. I think the real problem is the philosophy behind the country, though.
What's that?
Well, you're not going to get this right away, but it's the I'm as good as you are philosophy. You know what I mean? Because they keep dividing by the lowest possible denominator, and then everything becomes okay. Because who is one person to pull rank over another person? Do you understand? I do not have your verbal capabilities. I cannot really embellish on that.
I understand what you said. Well, I hope that you enjoyed the story. Hope that you enjoyed the monologue. It was a very, very deep, personal one. Frankly, none of it was any of your damn business. None of it will change anything.
I know that.
For your own voyeuristic enjoyment, I decided to tell the story, and I may even tell one or two more in the next week or so.
I appreciate it. But even the stories that are not personal, just the monologues. I like them.
You like them?
I do.
Thanks ever so much.
Okay.
Ever noticed that when somebody in your household gets the sneezes or the flu or whatever it might be, that it just seems to go round and round and round and round, no matter what you do, no matter how careful you are about washing the silverware, making sure that nobody drinks out of the same cup or the same glass. Did it ever dawn on you that your air conditioning, your heating system is picking it up, dragging it through the vents and just recirculating the germs over and over and over again? It's called sick building syndrome or indoor pollution. Call it whatever you want. It's true. Just go over to the vent. Go over to the air conditioning vent and look at it. Look at all the gunk that's built up on it. Then think about what's inside up in that ductwork. There's utterly no way for you to get at it. All of that gunk, all of the mold, the mildew, the germs residing in the ductwork. And there's not a damn thing you can do about it except to have a professional company like Master Care Maintenance come in, seal that ductwork, vacuum it, and then coat over what might be left behind so that it doesn't just keep circulating, and install the type of filter that will trap virtually anything in the air. Master Care Maintenance, it's what they do. To the phones again we go. Zephyr Hills, hi Zephyr, you're on the air.
Bob?
Yeah?
Listen, I heard you talking earlier, and I just think you're being very rude about this whole situation. You're calling your father such
names. Son of a bitch is what I call him, that's right. Son of a bitch.
That's what I'm saying. So if he's a son of a bitch, that means you're a bastard, right, Bob?
No, it doesn't, ma'am.
Well, you're saying that you don't know him, you don't want to know him, you don't want to know. You only got one father in this world.
Ma'am, I don't believe that is what I said. I said he's the one that walked away from me.
Well, you only have one father in this world. You should love your father.
I do, ma'am, I do. I love him very much.
And you're calling him names?
Yes, ma'am, I am, because he wasn't man enough to stand up and shut his mother up. But you're probably one of those women that, dominates your son, too, and you kind of appreciate the kind of son that would just look down at the floor and shuffle his feet as you were, ragging on.
I let my boy do what he wants.
Right, of course you do, ma'am. That's what my grandmother would have said, too.
I think you're just rude, Bob. I'm sorry.
Oh, I see.
I mean, the poor man
you think I'm rude, man, because I object to two so-called adults for a decade playing games with my life, using me as the prize to get back at each other? You think that makes me rude for objecting to that? To hell with you, lady.
He brought you in this world, didn't he?
To hell with you, lady. My grandmother said he didn't. And he didn't. He wouldn't stand up and say one way or the other.
Hey, Bob.
Yeah, lady?
One last thing.
Yeah?
If I go to hell, I'll see you there.
Oh, no, you won't, lady. There ain't no hell.
Well, then
which is a tragedy for people like you. Bartow, you're on the air at 970 WFLA.
Bob, my fine outstanding friend over in Tampa. How you doing, sir?
Fine, thank you.
Listen, for that woman in Zephyr Hills that just got through, I bet you she ain't never been through the rigmarole that you yourself have been through, and me myself I've been through.
She sounds to me like the kind of woman that would have sat there and said those things.
Well, I had to start well, it's the same thing happened, but it was in a different tone. My dad went over for a while, over 4 years over Vietnam. My mom, she divorced him while he was over there, which I cussed her, in my own mind. I didn't cuss her to her face because I have more respect because she's my mom. And she got divorced from him while he was over there fighting for our country. He comes back, and I'll say the same thing, that he's a no good SOB because after they got divorced, he moved out of the state, and he left me and my brother and my brother to take care of my sisters and my mom. And here I was at 12, 13 years old, and I didn't have no one. I'm the same way as you. People, you go up and get yourself enlisted in, say, like minor league baseball. Everybody else there has their dad there. It's kind of hell, not having no one there
Well, you know what I mean.
I sure do know what you mean.
But, you know, that woman is...
Too bad there's so many men running around that just don't give a damn about what you and I mean.
You know, it still burns my ass to the day when I go up there and see him. He comes down very occasionally and sees us. Every once in a while, he'll call us up.
Oh, is that damn
I love him. You know, I really do. And I love my mom. But, it's just hell on the kid. And people don't realize, it's real hard. Hell, I'm 33 years old, Bob. And I never will forget that day. Whenever my mom told me, says, well, me and your father's getting a divorce. It's just an empty feeling that you got. And, here you are, you're 13 years old, your brother's 15, and you get the whole load dumped on you. It just ain't right. It just ain't right because you got your little sisters. And I had 3 sisters. I ain't going to let it all get dumped on them. And, they were too young to really realize what was going on. My older sister was 8 at the time. She was probably about your age whenever all this happened to you. Me and my brother was a little bit able to cope with it, but, there ain't no words to describe it. It's nothing but pure hell for the kids.
Well, there's literally nothing that can be done about it. There's nothing that, there's no legislation. There's nothing except every now and then maybe for somebody to tell the story.
Well, I told my dad about it, and I told my mom about it whenever all the kids were gone. I told them both I didn't appreciate it. It was just a point of her divorcing him because he wasn't there. And then him, whenever he come back from Southeast Asia, I love him and I love her. But then he moves out of state and he don't even come to see us, and then he refused to pay child support. Bob, it was a bitch. Excuse the expression.
No, it's not a matter of excusing the expression. There is no other word. That's what it was.
Bob, I'll tell you what, my friend, I listen to you every day, and I love your show. I really do. And let me throw in one quick thing. I've seen you on TV, and shoot, you look like Charles Atlas on TV. You really do.
Angle. Thank you very much, my friend.
You got a beautiful wife.
Yes,
good-looking
that I
dog,
do.
too.
Take care.
You take care.
Good-looking dog. Is that what he said at the end? Whoa. 990 Ellis. 11.5 minutes after the hour, 5 o'clock. Welcome back. It is a Tuesday, March the 21st, 1989. We are, of course, talking about inflation. 2 lines available. Hey, off we go to Seminole. Hi, Sam. You're on the air.
Hi, Bob.
Hi.
You're not talking about inflation. You're talking about divorce and children, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I've never called you before, I guess because I was too nervous, but I was divorced when I was 25. Mm-hmm. And at the time, I had a 2-year-old daughter and a 4-year-old daughter. And I guess, you can hear horror stories from all kinds of divorced adults. The children don't have a chance at divorce. But my ex-husband left the state and decided not to pay child support. But anytime my children would ask questions about him, I would try to not badmouth him any way. It got to the point...
Which is damned hard to do.
Why?
Why?
Uh-huh.
Are you serious?
Oh, it's very hard to do.
That's what I'm saying. It's damned hard to do.
They would be eating their dinner, and I would go in the next room and think that I was just going to lose my mind.
I don't understand.
In my idea, why should I badmouth him to them? When they grow up, they can form their own opinion. He would show up about once a year, and he would just show up on the doorstep, literally, just to visit the kids. And they would ask me when he left, when's Daddy coming back? And I finally got to the point where I'd be honest, and I'd say, I don't know. The next time you see him, ask him. And I think that you asked the question on the radio a while ago, what can be done about this? I think that the parents who are involved in the divorce have to put aside their differences when they're in front of the children, and they should not badmouth the other parent to the children, because when the children get to a certain age, they will form their opinion.
Well, you see, one of the great problems with families and raising families and having families is all too often, I mean, literally from the first instant, from conception, it is one partner giving a child to the other partner for whatever reason. Because daddy wants a son, because mommy wants to be a mommy, whatever it might be. Almost from the beginning, in too many families, the child is not a child, it is a possession. to be handed back and forth, to be given as a reward, to be withdrawn as punishment.
Well,
And that's where the problem is. I was one of those gifts, apparently.
Anybody who's never had children, and I was guilty of this too, does not know really what is involved in having a child.
Well, unless you can think back.
But I think that adults are selfish. I think that adults have the children, like you say, they do get in the way. I'm guilty of that myself. A lot of times I feel, I could be doing this, or I could be doing that. But when it comes down to the bottom line, I would never give them up. And I would never decide. I know some people who have chosen not to have children, and I think that it's probably better that they didn't, because for some strong feeling of theirs, they do not want to have children. However, I think once an adult, or a lot of times teenagers, decide to have a child, it is their responsibility to raise that child.
I frankly, first of all, think it's much too damned easy to get out of a marriage these days.
Well, my marriage, there was nothing terribly wrong with it. There was no beating. There was no adultery. I don't believe in adultery. Don't believe in beating.
Just wasn't fun anymore, right? I can dig that. I've been married a couple of times.
It was a teenage romance that grew into a marriage that grew up, and at 25, there we were. So, I'll be honest. It is very easy to get a divorce. But I think that that's not the issue. I think if you do decide to get a divorce, the number one priority has to be the children. Now, I'm fortunate enough that it's been about 4.5 years since I was divorced. 3.5 years after I was divorced, I remarried. And I remarried a wonderful man who accepted my children. He can't, overnight accept them as my own, but he has 2 children who live with his ex-wife. And I see the other side of the story where the ex-wife says how bad Daddy is, and, so we kind of see both sides of the story here. But like I said, I think the first priority has to be the children. I think that the parents have to grow up and stop acting more immature than the children are. Because
Except there's not a damn thing that you and I can do to make that come true.
What we can do is take care of our children, take care of our family. What we try to do, my new husband and I, is try to make a good home for his stepson when he's here, which he's here a lot, and we show him a lot of love. And so he, on the one hand, his natural mother is saying how bad his real father is, but on the other hand, his father spends a lot of quality time with him, which to me is not fair to the child. For instance, the child will not show any affection to me when he's in front of his natural mother. However, when he's at our house, he'll give me a hug. He'll walk up and say, I love you. Very affectionate, but he's afraid that he will betray his natural mother. Same thing when he sees his father. He's afraid to show his mother how much care he has for his natural father. And with my ex, when I have, like every year been in contact with him, I have told him, you can't come in every year into the girl's life because they're going to not care. And they're not, it's going to come a point where, well, we know you're our father, but so what? And I've told him, I said, call him on the phone, keep in contact with him, but, he doesn't even call him on their birthday. So the consequence of that is he is losing the relationship with 2 beautiful children, out of sight, out of mind. And in a young child's mind, the man who's in the house and is caring for him and hugging him and kissing him and taking care of him, that's going to be their daddy. And I think what a lot of men and women who abandon their children don't realize that, 5 years later, you can't make up for lost time.
Probably about the only thing that could be done in any shape, manner, or form to help this type of a problem would be for society to pretty much go back to the way they were in the 1940s and the 1950s and ostracize divorced people.
I was born in 1960. I don't know, but I remember when I was growing up,
the things I talked about really happened.
The whole time I grew up until I was in, late high school, I knew one family that was divorced. That was it, and it was weird to me.
Wow. And
now my children will come home from school, and they'll refer to somebody's real daddy or their other daddy like it's just nothing. And in a way it's good because the school system is very good on Mother's Day and Father's Day. They realize there are a lot of broken families. Like you say, they're making it easier too. But I think the good thing about that is that the children aren't suffering at school too. The children did not create the divorce, and they should not be made to suffer.
Well, but I was talking about putting some pressure by the ostracization. However, nobody bothered to ask me or my mother back then whether or not she left, she was divorced because she was a floozy and didn't want to stay with my father, or whether or not my father beat the hell out of her and was a poor provider. Nobody asked. It's just that because she was divorced, she was ostracized. So that's not such a great idea either. Again, it's one of those problems. There just isn't any answer.
Well, I think it's sad, too. I think it's sad that it's so hard for the father to get custody. When I was going through my divorce, I was really afraid that I was going to lose my children. And as I said, there was no adultery, no beating. It was one of, like you put it, divorce was easy.
Mm-hmm.
And but I was really afraid that because financially it was a joke. I was making no money. And I was really afraid that because of that, I would lose my children. And my attorney told me that unless I'm an acting prostitute in front of my children, the chances of my ex-husband getting custody were little to nothing. And that's what I think is sad, because there are a lot of men out there who make a lot better parents than the woman. And it is so hard for the man to get custody of the children, because they could make it a lot easier for the children. I'm not saying so much financially, but emotionally, a lot of them care a lot more.
Well, even if the court doesn't go along with it, there are other things that they can do. Can live a lot closer. You can, they're just on and on and on and on if they really care that much. I want to thank you very much for the call and the input.
Thank you, and I like your show. I've been listening to you for about 3 months, and I wish you were still in your old time slot, because now I have to get the kids and come home, so sometimes I miss part of your show. But thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Gary McHenry, the man that, the traffic reporter that people say, gosh, I wish Gary was in a different time slot, like overnights or something, about with a dangerous traffic report, an airborne one at that. Hi, Gary.
May just be the men that say that, Bob, to keep me out of the way. Traffic.
You might want to get a piece of paper and pencil for this one. Life is very strange, and you never know what it will bring. I could pause for a moment while you're writing that down, but I'll continue nonetheless. I never thought, I truly, truly never thought that I'd be able to walk away from cigarettes as easily as I did 4 months ago. Back to the phones we go. Tampa. Hi, Tampa. You're on the air at 970 WFLA.
Hi, Bob.
Hi.
Listen, when I dialed you, I wanted to talk about your monologue, but with all the calls you've been getting and hanging on the line, I've got a couple of other questions I'd like to ask you. In the meantime, sure. I'm hanging in here because I've got night classes at Chamberlain High, so I got to get moving. Your mom and dad, I maybe could be their ages. Did you ever think that they had access to the information to raise children?
Neither were bad parents per se. My mother was just a woman who wasn't ready to be a mother. A woman who was madly in love with this man who was lying to her for 10 years, and my father was just a mama's boy. That's all.
Okay, but do you think that they had access